August 1945. Across hundreds of airfields spanning from California to the Philippines, nearly 10,000 North American B-25 Mitchell medium bombers sit silent beneath the summer sun. The twin-engined aircraft that carried American air power across two oceans now face an uncertain future. At Payota Army Airfield in Texas alone, more than 2,000 bombers crowd the tarmac in neat rows stretching towards the horizon. Similar scenes unfold at Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, Ontario Army Airfield in California, and Kingman, Arizona. In the Pacific Theater, B-25s line coral runways from Okinawa to New Guinea, their aluminum skins still bearing scorch marks and patched bullet holes. The question confronting American military planners is stark. What does one do with the largest fleet of medium bombers ever assembled when the war they were built to fight has suddenly ended? The scale of the problem is extraordinary. North American Aviation had delivered 9,816 B-25s between 1940 and August 1945, making it one of the most produced American combat aircraft of the war. Approximately 8,200 of these remain in American hands at war's end, scattered across 340 airfields worldwide. Another 862 serve with Allied nations under Lend-Lease arrangements. The bomber had proven itself versatile beyond its original medium bomber role, serving as a strafer, skip bomber, trainer, and transport. Yet in the atomic age that dawns in August 1945, questions emerge about whether conventional bombers retain relevance. The United States Army Air Forces faces competing pressures. Demobilization demands rapid force reduction, whilst the emerging Cold War suggests retaining capable aircraft. What unfolds over the following decade is a story of mass disposal, foreign service, civilian conversion, and selective preservation that transforms thousands of combat veterans into scrap metal, training aids, or cherished survivors.
The situation confronting American authorities in late 1945 is unlike anything in aviation history. The sheer quantity of B-25s creates logistical nightmares. At war's peak, these bombers operated from bases in North America, the Aleutian Islands, Europe, North Africa, India, China, and across the vast Pacific. Now they must be consolidated, evaluated, and disposed of at breathtaking speed. The Army Air Forces establishes massive storage depots at 5 primary locations: Kingman in Arizona, Payota in Texas, Walnut Ridge in Arkansas, Ontario in California, and Albuquerque in New Mexico. By December 1945, funneling operations deliver B-25s to these sites at rates exceeding 200 aircraft weekly. The aircraft arrive in wildly varying conditions. Some accumulate fewer than 100 flight hours, fresh from factories when Japan surrendered. Others bear 1,500 combat hours and battle damage hastily repaired. Maintenance records reveal 4,200 B-25s require fewer than 50 hours of work to achieve flight-ready status, whilst another 2,800 need extensive overhaul. The remaining 1,200 are categorized as war-weary, suitable only for ground training or scrapping. Each bomber contains approximately 2,800 pounds of aluminum, 400 pounds of copper, and smaller quantities of strategic materials, including zinc and magnesium. With post-war metal shortages driving reconstruction efforts, this represents significant economic value. The Army Air Forces creates a classification system to determine each aircraft's fate. Category A aircraft, those with low hours and minimal required maintenance, are designated for retention in the rapidly shrinking active force or reserve units. Category B aircraft may be sold to Allied nations or civilian buyers. Category C aircraft are stripped for spare parts before being scrapped. By February 1946, only 1,200 B-25s remain in active Army Air Forces service, down from a wartime peak of 2,656 in July 1944. The demobilization proceeds with stunning speed.
The disposal operation itself proves massive in scope. At Kingman Army Airfield, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation's War Assets Administration assumes responsibility for processing surplus aircraft. The site handles 5,500 aircraft of all types, including approximately 1,800 B-25s. Workers armed with cutting torches systematically dismantle bombers, removing engines, instruments, radios, and salvageable components. The aluminum fuselages and wings are then cut into manageable sections and sold to smelters. A complete B-25 can be reduced to scrap metal in approximately 16 hours. By late 1946, the smelting operations at Kingman process 30 bombers daily, feeding aluminum ingots into American industrial recovery. Similar operations unfold at Walnut Ridge, where the RFC processes another 1,400 B-25s between September 1945 and June 1947. The Army sells complete flyable aircraft for as little as $8,500, approximately 1% of their $142,000 wartime procurement cost. Parts-only sales fetch $2,000 to $3,500 per airframe. The economic calculus is brutal. Storage costs exceed $200 monthly per aircraft, making rapid disposal financially imperative. By December 1947, fewer than 4,000 B-25s remain in American custody, and scrapping operations continue accelerating. Yet not all bombers face the cutting torch. Foreign military sales provide alternative disposal routes. The Royal Canadian Air Force acquires 75 B-25Js in 1951 to replace aging Mitchells received during wartime. These serve until 1960 in photographic reconnaissance and training roles from bases at Rockcliffe, Ontario and McDonald, Manitoba. The Royal Netherlands Air Force takes delivery of 160 B-25s between 1946 and 1951, operating them from Dutch air bases and in the Dutch East Indies during the Indonesian independence conflict. Indonesian forces eventually capture several during that country's revolution. Latin American nations prove enthusiastic Mitchell customers.
Brazil's Fuerza Aérea Brasileira operates 29 B-25Js from 1946 through 1970, making it the longest military operator of the type. The aircraft serve from Santa Cruz Air Base and participate in anti-submarine patrols along Brazil's extensive coastline. Venezuela acquires 12 B-25Js in 1947, operating them until 1960. Uruguay, Cuba, and Colombia also purchased small numbers, with Colombia operating 6 B-25Cs until 1958. These foreign operators value the Mitchell's robust construction, generous spare parts availability, and proven reliability. The Chinese Nationalist Air Force receives 131 B-25s between 1946 and 1949 as American military aid. These aircraft see combat during the Chinese Civil War, with nationalist pilots flying ground attack missions against communist forces. When the nationalists retreat to Taiwan in 1949, approximately 40 B-25s make the crossing and continue serving until 1958. Several captured Mitchells reportedly enter communist Chinese service, though details remain scarce. If you're finding this deep dive into post-war aviation history interesting, consider subscribing for more detailed explorations of what happened to wartime equipment. The civilian market absorbs substantial numbers of surplus B-25s, though extensive modifications prove necessary. The Civilian Aeronautics Administration certifies civilian conversion standards in 1946, and numerous companies specialize in demilitarizing bombers for commercial use. The most extensive conversions remove armament, bomb bays, and military equipment, whilst adding civilian avionics, passenger seating, and executive interiors. Hayes Industries of Birmingham, Alabama, converts 90 B-25s into executive transports between 1946 and 1951, installing plush seating for 6 to 8 passengers, full galleys, and sleeping berths. These aircraft find buyers among oil companies, mining corporations, and wealthy individuals who value the Mitchell's range, speed, and reliability. Hollywood discovers the B-25 fleet as well.
Howard Hughes purchases 4 war surplus Mitchells in 1948 to support filming operations. Other studios acquire small numbers for aviation films, finding the aircraft sufficiently common to permit spectacular crash scenes without destroying rare aircraft. By 1955, approximately 180 B-25s remain in civilian hands, modified for roles including aerial survey, firefighting, and agricultural spraying. The bomber's sturdy construction and reliable Wright R-2600 engines make it economically viable despite high fuel consumption. The United States Air Force, established as an independent service in September 1947, retains modest B-25 numbers for specialized roles. Approximately 300 remain in service through 1950, primarily as advanced trainers at bases including Randolph Field in Texas and Williams Field in Arizona. The outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950 prompts temporary retention of these aircraft, though none deploy to combat.
By 1954, jet aircraft increasingly dominate training pipelines, and the remaining B-25s transfer to Air National Guard units. The last USAF B-25s retire in 1959, ending 19 years of American military service. The scrapping operations that began in 1945 continue through the 1950s, eliminating stored aircraft as they deteriorate beyond economic repair. At Davis Mann Air Force Base in Arizona, successor to the wartime storage sites, workers dismantled the final stored B-25s between 1958 and 1960. By decade's end, fewer than 200 B-25s survive worldwide, scattered across foreign military operators, civilian owners, and nascent aviation museums. Preservation efforts emerged slowly and haphazardly. The United States Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio acquired several B-25s during the 1950s, including a B-25D transferred from active service in 1958. The Smithsonian Institution accepts a B-25J in 1960, though budget constraints delay restoration until 1975.
Private collectors begin acquiring surplus Mitchells as well, particularly in the southwestern United States, where dry desert climate facilitates long-term storage. The 1968 publication of Ted Lawson's memoir, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and subsequent 1970 film adaptation spark renewed interest in preserving B-25s associated with the Doodle Raid. Intensive searches locate several surviving raiders. Aircraft number 402344, flown by Lieutenant Colonel Doolittle himself, is eventually identified in storage at March Air Force Base in California. Following extensive restoration, it joins the National Museum of the United States Air Force collection in 1991. Other Doodle Raiders prove impossible to locate. Most were scrapped in 1945 to 46 before their historical significance was recognized. Foreign operators contribute survivors as their B-25 fleets retire. The Royal Netherlands Air Force donates a B-25J to the Dutch Aviation Museum at Sisterburg upon retirement in 1955. Brazil's final B-25s, retired in 1970, enter museum collections in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. Indonesian forces abandoned several Mitchell bombers at various airfields during the 1960s, and aviation archaeologists recover several of these derelict aircraft decades later. The warbird movement, emerging in the 1970s, drives aggressive efforts to locate and restore flyable B-25s. Collectors discover aircraft in surprising locations. Buried in New Guinea jungles, abandoned on Pacific islands, converted to cargo haulers in Alaska, and stored behind barns across rural America. Approximately 45 B-25s achieve airworthy status between 1970 and 2000. Maintained by wealthy collectors and aviation museums, the bombers become popular airshow attractions, their powerful radial engines and distinctive profile drawing enthusiastic crowds. Restoration challenges prove substantial. The Wright R-2600 engines require specialized maintenance knowledge, increasingly scarce as wartime mechanics retire. Spare parts become precious, with restorers canvassing the globe for components. Several organizations specialize in manufacturing reproduction parts, though costs escalate dramatically. A complete engine overhaul can exceed $200,000, whilst rebuilding landing gear or recovering control surfaces demands similar investment. The most extensive restoration projects consume 5 to 10 years and $2 million or more. Current preservation statistics reveal the B-25's scarcity relative to its wartime production. Approximately 34 B-25s remain airworthy worldwide as of 2025, maintained by museums, private collectors, and warbird organizations. Another 45 survive in static museum displays across the United States, Canada, Brazil, the Netherlands, and China. 8%, 79 aircraft from 9,816 produced. By comparison, fewer than 100 complete B-25s survive in any condition, including derelict airframes awaiting restoration. Notable survivors include Panchito, a B-25J restored to represent a 345th Bomb Group aircraft and flying from Texas. Takeoff time, maintained by the Commemorative Air Force in Arizona, represents a B-25J and 499th Bomb Squadron markings. Made in the Shade flies from Delaware, representing a 12th Bomb Group Mitchell. These flying examples provide visceral connections to wartime history that photographs and documents cannot match. Museum displays include exceptional examples at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio,
the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida, and the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum in Washington. The B-25's influence extends beyond preserved examples. The experience gained in mass producing, operating, and maintaining nearly 10,000 medium bombers informed post-war American aviation development. North American aviation applied B-25 production techniques to subsequent aircraft, including the B-45 Tornado jet bomber and the F-86 Sabre fighter.
The logistical challenges of supporting global B-25 operations shaped Air Force maintenance doctrine throughout the Cold War. The aircraft's versatility, serving roles from anti-shipping strikes to gunship, foreshadowed the multi-role approach dominating modern military aviation. Yet the overwhelming majority of B-25 Mitchells vanished into salvage yards, their aluminum fuselages reborn as cookware, window frames, and industrial components. The urgent post-war need for strategic materials, combined with the staggering storage costs, ensured that preservation remained an afterthought. Those advocating retention faced accusations of sentimentality that America could ill afford. Only decades later, as the final wartime generation aged, did the loss of these historical artifacts become apparent. August 1945 brought victory, but for the B-25 Mitchell fleet, it marked the beginning of systematic elimination. The bombers that carried American air power from Tokyo to Tunisia, from the Aleutians to the Mediterranean, faced peacetime with uncertain purpose. Most met cutting torches within 2 years. Others served foreign air forces, trained post-war pilots, or transformed into civilian transports. The handful that survive today, whether flying or static, represent not merely aircraft preservation, but tangible connections to a conflict that shaped the modern world. Each survivor carries stories of crews who flew them, mechanics who maintained them, and battles they fought. If you found this video insightful, watch what happened to Germany's FW-190 fighters after World War II next. It explores how the Allies competed to capture these advanced fighters, tested them extensively, and ultimately eliminated most, whilst a precious few survived into preservation. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more.